Just hours after our analysis of Sablenka's psychological struggles, tennis world number 2 Coco Gauff has made shocking revelations about the scale of abuse she faces online. "It's the worst you can get," Gauff said. "Death threats to your family, to yourself. I've had people DM my boyfriend and friends about it. Racist comments like all you can imagine."
What Gauff is describing isn't isolated, it's systemic. When we talk about athlete mental health and performance anxiety, we often overlook this massive external pressure that's operating 24/7. These athletes aren't just dealing with competition stress, they're dealing with continuous psychological warfare from strangers.
Gauff's comments come as the WTA and ITF released their first-ever season-wide report on online abuse. The numbers are staggering. Over 8,000 abusive posts targeting 458 players in 2024. But here's the connection to our Sablenka story. 40% of this abuse comes from angry gamblers.
This gambling connection is crucial. When Sablenka struggles against Masarova after her forced nice behavior, when players can't close out matches they should win, these performance dips trigger massive financial losses for bettors. And those bettors don't stay silent. They attack players personally, creating this vicious cycle.
The timing of Gauff's statements is particularly significant. She's speaking out just weeks after her French Open victory over Sablenka, a match that ended with Sablenka making controversial comments about the loss. Now we're seeing how that kind of public criticism creates a pressure cooker environment for all players.
I would love for some of the social media platforms to get involved, not only when it comes to tennis players. Influencers, other athletes, they all get these comments, so it's something that can be addressed. For me, it's more about banning these accounts and banning people with the same phone number or email from making new accounts.
Gauff is proposing technological solutions, but the psychological damage is already done. When athletes know that every missed shot, every lost point, every show of emotion will trigger a flood of death threats and racist abuse, it fundamentally changes how they compete. They start self-censoring, just like we saw with Sablenka.
British player Katie Boulter revealed she received death threats during the French Open, including messages saying, "Hope you get cancer," and threats against her grandmother's grave. These messages came during her match, not after a loss, but during live play when she lost a single set.
It becomes more apparent every single time you go on your phone. I think it increases in number, and it also increases in the level of things that people say. I don't think there's anything off the cards now. As a tennis player, I just want to see and protect some of the younger players that come through.
The escalation is terrifying. We've moved from general criticism to targeted, personalized threats that extend to family members. When a player like Boulter worries about protecting younger players, she's essentially describing a sport where psychological terrorism has become normalized.
WTA report reveals that just 97 accounts were responsible for 23% of all abuse, and 5 players received 26% of the total abuse identified. This isn't random trolling, it's concentrated, systematic harassment targeting the sport's biggest stars.
This concentration tells us something important about the psychology of online abuse. The most successful, most visible athletes become lightning rods for displaced anger, especially from gambling losses. When someone loses money betting on Gauff or Sablenka, they don't blame themselves, they blame the player.
Here's where this connects back to our Sablenka analysis. After her controversial French Open comments about Gauff, Sablenka felt compelled to publicly apologize, calling her remarks unprofessional. She wrote to Gauff privately to make amends. This is damage control mode, exactly what we identified as psychologically dangerous.
Sablenka's apology reveals the impossible position these athletes face. Her natural reaction after losing was frustration and emotional honesty. But the online backlash forced her to suppress that authenticity and perform contrition. It's the same psychological pattern we saw with her forced thumbs-up gesture.
Gauff herself admits to spending 30 minutes blocking all the people after matches. Think about that, a world number 2 player spending half an hour manually blocking abusers instead of focusing on recovery, strategy, or simply living her life. This is time theft of the highest order.
That blocking ritual is actually a coping mechanism, but it's also evidence of psychological hypervigilance. Gauff has trained herself to expect abuse, to prepare for it, to have systems to manage it. That mental energy should be going toward tennis excellence, not abuse management.
Gambling connection adds another disturbing layer. Gauff noted that TikTok does better filtering than Instagram, where she sees basically everything. But gambling-related abuse isn't random trolling, it's financially motivated harassment. These aren't just angry fans, they're people who lost money and want revenge.
When money is involved, the abuse becomes more targeted, more personal, more sustained. A regular troll might move on, but someone who lost significant money on a bet will hold a grudge. They'll remember specific players, specific matches, specific moments. It becomes personal vendetta disguised as sports commentary.
15 cases from this abuse monitoring system have already been escalated to law enforcement, including 3 submitted to the FBI. We're not talking about hurt feelings, we're talking about credible threats that require federal investigation.
When abuse reaches law enforcement levels, it crosses from psychological pressure into genuine safety concerns. Athletes start making decisions based not just on performance optimization, but on personal security. That's not sport anymore, that's survival mode.
Most chilling aspect of Gauff's revelation is that the abuse targets her boyfriend and friends too. This isn't contained to the athlete, it's designed to isolate them by making their support network unsafe. It's psychological warfare with a sophisticated understanding of human vulnerability.
When abusers target family and friends, they're essentially taking hostages. The athlete faces an impossible choice: stay on social media for career reasons and expose loved ones to harassment, or withdraw completely and damage their professional opportunities. It's strategic cruelty.
Gauff mentioned receiving nudity. Things like that. Sexual harassment is also part of this toxic ecosystem. Female athletes face a multi-layered assault: racist abuse, death threats, sexual harassment, and gambling-related anger. Each layer compounds the psychological damage.
The intersectional nature of this abuse is particularly damaging for young female athletes of color like Gauff. She's facing hatred based on race, gender, and athletic success simultaneously. The psychological resources required to process and deflect this multi-front assault are enormous.
Jessica Pegula, a member of the WTA Players Council, called for the gambling industry and social media companies to tackle the problem at its source. But here's the issue: the source isn't just technology or regulation. The source is a culture that treats athletes as financial instruments rather than human beings.
When fans can bet on every point, every game, every set, they develop a sense of ownership over athlete performance. They feel entitled to outcomes because they've invested money. This transforms spectators into stakeholders who believe they have the right to punish players for costing them money.
The irony is crushing. As Gauff calls for protection from online abuse, she's simultaneously being criticized for being too vocal, too political, too outspoken. The same forces that created the Sablenka authenticity crisis are now pressuring Gauff to stay silent about her own psychological safety.
Athletes face an impossible double bind: speak out about abuse and be labeled as complainers who should toughen up, or stay silent and allow the abuse to escalate unchecked. Either choice carries professional and personal costs. There's no safe path forward under the current system.
Gauff's proposal for phone number and email-based banning is technically sound, but it misses the deeper issue. The problem isn't just repeat offenders creating new accounts. It's that creating abusive accounts is easy, consequence-free, and often financially motivated.
Real solutions require addressing the gambling industry's responsibility, social media platforms' profit incentives, and the broader cultural acceptance of athlete dehumanization. Technical fixes alone won't solve what is fundamentally a cultural and economic problem.
Timing of these revelations, coming just after our Sablenka analysis, reveals the complete picture. Athletes are being pressured to suppress their natural reactions to avoid public criticism, while simultaneously being bombarded with private abuse that would traumatize most people. It's a psychological vice that's tightening from both sides.
We're witnessing the emergence of a new form of athletic pressure that previous generations never faced. The combination of public performance expectations, private harassment, financial stakeholder entitlement, and 24/7 social media access creates unprecedented psychological demands on these young athletes.
When Gauff says it's the worst you can get, she's not exaggerating. Death threats, racist abuse, sexual harassment, family targeting, and gambling-motivated revenge. This is the psychological environment in which we expect athletes to perform at their peak. It's unsustainable and ultimately counterproductive.
Dr. Mitchell Marcus, thank you for this critical analysis. What we've uncovered today isn't just about social media abuse, it's about the systematic dehumanization of athletes in the digital age. From Sablenka's forced authenticity crisis to Gauff's call for protection, we're seeing athletes pushed beyond human limits. This episode was brought to you by Unstruct.ai, where we examine the hidden psychological forces shaping athletic performance. Today, we've revealed how online abuse has become the invisible opponent that every athlete faces, more persistent than any rival, more brutal than any defeat, and more damaging than any injury. When world number 2 Coco Gauff spends 30 minutes after matches blocking abusers instead of recovering, when death threats arrive during live play, when racist and sexual harassment become routine, we've crossed from competition into psychological warfare. Gambling connection makes it worse: financially motivated abuse that treats athletes as profit-generating machines rather than human beings. WTA reports findings are staggering. 8,000 abusive posts targeting 458 players, with 40% coming from angry gamblers and 15 cases requiring law enforcement intervention. But behind these numbers are young athletes like Gauff and Sablenka, trying to compete at the highest level while managing psychological assaults that would overwhelm most adults. Solution isn't just better technology or stricter moderation. It's fundamentally rethinking our relationship with athletic performance and recognizing that athletes' humanity must be protected, not exploited. And Coco Gauff calls online abuse the worst you can get. She's describing a reality that threatens the future of professional sports. How can we expect peak performance from athletes who face daily death threats? How can we demand authenticity while punishing genuine emotion? How can we celebrate competition while enabling harassment of competitors? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're urgent challenges that demand immediate action. Because if we don't protect the people who create the moments we love, soon there won't be any moments left to love. Thanks for watching, and remember, behind every statistic is a human being who deserves better than what we're currently offering.